What if getting wealthier had less to do with earning more and more to do with what you already do with the money sitting in your account right now? Small financial choices feel meaningless in the moment, but they repeat day after day, year after year, until they quietly become something much bigger. Here's the simple formula hiding behind that repetition. Everybody's heard that money makes more money over time. Fewer people realize the same exact principle runs underneath habits themselves, not just dollar signs in an account. A small decision, repeated without fail, stops behaving like a small decision at all. Skip a $5 coffee run and put that money aside instead, and on day one, it's basically nothing. A rounding error, barely worth mentioning out loud. But stretch that same choice across years instead of days, and the math stops being boring. During a lunch break, someone might toss a few dollars into savings without thinking twice about it. No fanfare, no big moment. Multiply that by hundreds of paydays, and suddenly there's a number on the screen that wasn't there before. That's the whole secret. Nothing dramatic, just repetition nobody bothered to interrupt. Willpower is a terrible long-term financial strategy, and most people already suspect this deep down. It works great for a week, sometimes a month, and then a rough day shows up and the whole plan quietly falls apart. Automation sidesteps the fight completely. Set up a transfer that pulls money out the same day a paycheck lands, and there's no daily decision left to make, no internal argument between saving and spending that has to be won over and over again. Someone working a retail job doesn't need to remember to save every single Friday. The system remembers for them, whether they're distracted, exhausted, or just having a bad week. Start with whatever amount feels sustainable, even if it's small. The goal was never willpower in the first place. It was removing the need for it entirely. Here's a question worth asking honestly. How many months have ended with barely anything left over, despite genuinely trying to save? This is exactly why waiting until the end of the month rarely works. The order matters more than the amount. Pay yourself first flips the usual sequence. Instead of spending first and saving whatever survives, a portion gets set aside the moment money arrives, before bills, before groceries, before anything else even gets touched. A rideshare driver finishing a long weekend shift might feel the urge to treat every extra dollar as spending money. But setting a portion aside first, before that urge even has a chance to speak up, changes the entire equation without requiring extra income or extra discipline. Whatever's left after that first transfer becomes the real, honest budget. Not a guess, not a hope, just what's actually available. Not every dollar leaving an account gets a fair trial before it disappears. Some payments just repeat automatically, month after month, without anyone stopping to ask if they're still worth it. A streaming subscription nobody's opened in 3 months. A food delivery habit that started during one busy week and never actually ended. A bank fee that could be avoided entirely with a 5-minute phone call. None of these feel dramatic on their own. That's exactly the problem. This isn't an argument for cutting out every small pleasure in life. Nobody's suggesting misery as a financial strategy. It's about noticing what's being paid for on autopilot without ever actually being valued or enjoyed anymore. Check a bank statement line by line sometime, slowly, without rushing. What shows up might be surprising. A late-night online cart, 3 items deep, feels completely justified at 11 p.m. Wait until morning, and half of it suddenly looks unnecessary. That gap between impulse and clarity is where this next habit lives. For anything non-essential, wait a full 24 hours before hitting purchase. No app deletion required, no drastic lifestyle overhaul. Just one simple pause standing between the urge and the transaction. Someone scrolling through their phone after a long shift might add a jacket to their cart purely out of boredom, not need. Come back the next day, and that same jacket often loses its grip entirely, revealed for what it actually was, a mood, not a decision. Whatever doesn't survive the wait gets redirected towards something that actually matters down the road. The rule isn't about restriction. It's about making sure spending reflects real choices, not passing impulses. Somewhere along the way, investing got a reputation for being complicated, something reserved for people who read financial news every morning and tracked the market like a hobby. That reputation is mostly undeserved. Nobody needs to predict the next big stock or time the perfect entry point. A steady hand beats a sharp eye here, almost every single time. What actually moves the needle is showing up consistently and giving time enough room to work. Think of a garden left untouched for a season. Nothing dramatic happens day to day, no visible progress worth photographing. Then months pass, and suddenly there's something real growing that wasn't planned around any single perfect moment. Regular contributions, left alone and reinvested, follow that same quiet pattern. The next question is obvious. What does that pattern actually look like in real numbers? Picture someone setting aside $100 a month. On its own, that number doesn't look like much, barely enough to turn heads, easy to dismiss as pointless before it even gets started. Now run 3 paths side by side. Someone stuffing that $100 in a drawer every month ends up with exactly what they put in, nothing more. Someone investing it regularly, letting growth compound quietly in the background, ends up with noticeably more than they contributed. Someone doing the same thing while slowly increasing their monthly amount over time pulls even further ahead of the other two. None of this comes with a guarantee. Investment returns move up and down, and no one can promise a specific outcome years in advance. But the gap between doing nothing, doing something, and doing something consistently tells a story numbers alone rarely manage to tell this clearly. A raise lands, and almost immediately, it starts looking for somewhere to go. A nicer car payment, a bigger apartment, dinners out that used to be reserved for special occasions and suddenly aren't anymore. None of that is inherently wrong. The problem shows up when the entire raise disappears into new spending without a single dollar getting redirected anywhere else first. Someone getting promoted at work might feel like they've finally earned the right to spend more freely, and in some ways they have. But splitting that increase, some toward lifestyle, some toward savings or debt, lets both things happen at once instead of one canceling out the other entirely. Income going up should mean progress speeding up too, not just expenses quietly catching up to match it dollar for dollar. Trying to monitor every single financial metric at once is a fast way to give up on all of them within a week. Nobody sticks with a system that feels like a second job. Pick one number instead: net worth, savings rate, total debt remaining, amount currently invested. It genuinely doesn't matter which one gets chosen, as long as it's checked regularly, ideally once a month, without turning into an obsession. A nurse finishing a 12-hour shift isn't going to open 5 different spreadsheets before bed, and she shouldn't have to. One number, glanced at consistently, does something spreadsheets full of data rarely accomplish. It makes progress visible in a way that actually sticks in memory. What gets measured tends to get noticed. What gets noticed tends to improve, almost without extra effort involved. Discipline gets far too much credit in personal finance conversations, and environment gets far too little. Most people don't fail because they lack willpower. They fail because their entire setup makes the wrong choice the easiest one available. Redesign that setup instead. Automate the investments so they happen without a second thought. Keep a separate account specifically for goals, tucked away from the account used for daily spending. Remove the easy, frictionless paths that make impulsive purchases just one tap away. A single parent juggling a full-time job doesn't have spare mental energy left over for constant financial vigilance by the end of the day. And honestly, nobody should have to rely on that kind of exhausting willpower in the first place. Good systems consistently beat good intentions. Set the system up once, and it keeps working long after motivation inevitably fades. There's always a reason to wait. Wait for a bigger paycheck. Wait until every debt is paid off. Wait for some perfect mythical moment when everything finally lines up all at once. That moment doesn't arrive on a schedule, and waiting for it usually just means losing time that could have been put to work already. A small, repeatable change started today quietly outperforms an ambitious plan that never actually gets off the ground. Someone renting an apartment alone, stretched a little thin most months, doesn't need a complete financial overhaul to begin. Setting aside $20 this week is worth infinitely more than the perfect plan still sitting untouched in someone's notes app 6 months from now. Small and consistent beats big and hypothetical every single time it's actually been tested. Ask someone to name the moment their finances turned around, and most people struggle to point to just one. That's because there usually isn't a single moment. There's a pattern, stretched out over years, made of choices too small to remember individually. $5 saved here, One purchase skipped there. A single automatic contribution, repeated without fail. A debt payment made on time, month after month, without a single missed cycle. An investment left untouched instead of pulled out during a nervous week. None of these choices look impressive standing alone. Nobody brags about skipping one delivery order or making one on-time payment at a dinner party. But stack thousands of these unremarkable decisions on top of each other, repeated without interruption, and the result stops looking small at all. The power was never in any single choice. It was always in doing it again. The compound effect gets misunderstood constantly, usually by people hoping it's secretly a shortcut, wearing a respectable disguise. It isn't, and pretending otherwise sets people up for real disappointment. There's no version of this where $5 a day quietly becomes a fortune within a single year, no matter how many online ads suggest otherwise. Anyone promising that kind of overnight transformation is selling something, not teaching something. The actual goal here was never speed. It's building financial behavior that holds up over 10 years, 20 years, longer than most people are initially willing to imagine committing to anything. Time and consistency do the heavy lifting that no shortcut, no matter how clever, has ever managed to replace. That's not the exciting answer. It's just the true one. Trying to fix an entire financial life in a single weekend usually ends the same way. Burnout by Wednesday, followed by quietly abandoning the whole plan a week later. Start smaller instead. Pick exactly 3 habits, automate 1 transfer, cut 1 recurring expense that stopped pulling its weight, and invest consistently according to whatever plan already makes sense for the situation. That's genuinely it for now. Not 8 habits attempted simultaneously, not a rigid schedule mapped out to the hour, just 3, repeated until they stop requiring conscious effort and start happening automatically in the background. Once those 3 feel less like tasks and more like second nature, adding a 4th becomes easy instead of overwhelming. Change that last tends to arrive quietly, one small layer at a time, never all at once. Wealth isn't built only through big, dramatic decisions that make for a good story later at a dinner table. It's built through the small ones nobody ever really notices happening in real time, the ones too quiet to brag about, too ordinary to remember individually. A few dollars set aside today looks almost insignificant sitting there alone in an account. 1 skipped purchase, 1 automatic transfer, 1 investment left untouched. None of it feels like progress in the moment it actually happens. But repeat that same small decision, paycheck after paycheck, year after year, without giving up on it halfway through, and insignificant stops being the right word entirely. What replaces it isn't luck, and it isn't some rare financial gift only certain people are born with. It's just repetition, given enough time to finally show its work. That's the whole secret. It was never hidden. It was just easy to overlook. If this changed how you think about small money decisions, follow the channel. There's a lot more like this coming, built for exactly this kind of thinking. Before you go, here's something worth actually answering, not just scrolling past. Which one small money habit are you going to start with your very next paycheck? Just one. Nothing complicated, nothing that requires an overhaul of your whole life. Drop it in the comments. Sometimes writing it down is what makes it real.